Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Well, sorry, not sorry. Meredith and I are on vacation. So I want to say thank you to everybody that came out, and special thank you to everyone that's helped us out this morning so far in the service, stepping up. I really appreciate that. Also, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that came out last Sunday and helped us last second get the building dried in. That was huge. We really needed to do that, and thank you again. I know that wasn't easy, and thank you everyone that helped out. So, hi, I'm Pastor Zane. For those of you that might be here for the first time, typically I do this in person. This week, I don't. So, come back next week and you'll see me live in the flesh, and Meredith as well. So, I'm going to get started this week. I'm going to pick up where we left off last week. Talked about the importance of realizing that you don't need a new life if you're not happy with things. You just need new patterns in your life. So, this week I'm going to pick up on that and kind of bring that whole thing to kind of a conclusion. But hopefully this is something that, has an impact in your life and really sticks and the Lord can use to make some changes. Because a lot of times, it's not that we're not satisfied. It's just there's some things in our life that we're just not happy with. And there's some things that we want and there's some things that we wish were different in our lives. And we don't have to throw the whole thing out. Sometimes we just have to make minor adjustments. That's what we talked about last week. And I want to talk about that again this week. For example, how many of you have ever said to yourself, you know what, I'm changing everything. I'm done with it all. I'm not going to be this person anymore. I'm going to be different. And you go out and you get a new gym membership. You start a new routine. You get a different mindset. And then you add, I'm going to get some new disciplines. And you just kind of put it all together. And you say, this is going to be the new me, man. And that works for about 3 days, right? And then what happens? Well, eventually life happens. And you end up going right back to what we call normal. And what happens a lot of times is we have all this motivation at the beginning, right? Whether it's the new year or a birthday or an event, something happens, and you have all this motivation, and you just say, you know what, I'm going to change it all right now. I'm going to make everything better. And so then you make all these changes, and it lasts for about 3 to 4, maybe 5 days, but it's like you're waiting for this ball to drop, and everything just finally goes back to what we call and feel as normal. And that happens not because you're lazy. I don't believe that that's the issue. I think it's because most people try to make changes in their life through intensity instead of consistency. Intensity is nice and it's good for certain things, and it is powerful. It feels powerful. But consistency is what eventually will change your life. Galatians 6:9 says this, let us not become weary in doing good. We'll reap a harvest if we do not give up. See, Paul is saying, listen, boys, we're making some serious changes here to the way that we serve God and worship God, and it's significant changes, and now we're going to do good. You're going to find yourself doing a lot more good, and he knows that sometimes when you're doing good things that are good, it can kind of wear you out a little bit. There's this fatigue that sets in for a little bit when you're sacrificing the flesh and you're kind of stripping away some things that used to be comfortable. And sometimes it's just a matter of comfort. It's not so much a matter of good or evil. It's just some of the habits in your life are just not beneficial and not going to get you where you want to be. So I'm not just talking about sin. Obviously, this can apply to some sin in your life, but really, I'm really talking about generating habits in your life that help you reach the goals and become the kind of person that you want to be, right? And Paul says, listen, guys, I know you get tired in doing good. But don't give up, because if you continue to do good, you will reap a harvest. And I want you to notice that he doesn't say, listen, boys, if you go really hard for a week, then you'll get there. No, he says, listen, if you don't give up, you know what that tells me is that the secret is not giving up. And the secret is not, instead of the secret being go as hard as you can, then that means that consistency is disciplined and intensity is emotion. And so intensity is always driven by how you feel. Like I've got this, man. Like some days I feel really motivated to go to the gym, and I go to the gym and I hit the workout, and I hit PRs, and it's nice and it's good. But then there's also some days where I don't feel like going to the gym. And if I'm just going to be led by intensity, and intensity is emotion, when I don't feel like going to the gym, then I just don't go to the gym. But if I'm being led and driven by consistency, then I go to the gym not because I feel like it, just because that's what I've decided. And that's really what I'm talking about this morning, right? So, for example, if you feel motivated, you go all in. We've all been there. We've all experienced that. We know what that feels like. But the problem with that is that if you don't feel anything, then you do nothing. And that's intensity. But consistency says, I'm going to do this whether I feel like it or not. You know, Luke says this, you know, he wrote this, and Jesus was talking about this thing. He's like, listen, boys, there's part of this aspect of following me that's going to require you to take up your cross daily. Not occasionally, not when it's convenient, daily. And if your life is built on motivation, then what happens is everything you build on that motivation will fall apart the moment you lose motivation. And that's going to happen in everything in life, man. Like there's this, no matter what it is, if it's a business, if it's a relationship, if it's a dream, we all start with this insane intensity of excitement about this new thing or this thing we're going to do, and we need that. That's good because that gets us up off the couch, that gets us out of our comfort zone, and it gets us started down the path. But change doesn't come from the intensity. Change is going to come from the daily adjustment to reaching for the dreams and the goals that we have. And so if your life is built on motivation, it'll just fall apart the moment you lose motivation. And so what I think is really powerful and what I've noticed, you know, that makes a difference is, like I talked about last week, small repeated actions. Those small repeated actions, the little things that you do daily will create real change in your life. And this is really where most people underestimate the process. They think, well, if it's small, then it doesn't matter. But small things repeated daily are literally picked. If you happen to be a reader and you pick 10 minutes, you know, a day, I'm going to spend 10 minutes a day. Then I'm going to read the Word. I'm going to read the Bible for 10 minutes a day, just to familiarize myself with some of the stories. Maybe you didn't grow up in a Christian home or something. You need to become familiar with the stories. You know, there's a lot of good stuff in there. The Bible's kind of significant. You know, it's been pretty influential in human history. So maybe you should familiarize yourself with it a little bit. Just saying. Now, you know, nobody wants to go out and take a Bible class most of the time, but, you know, and we don't want to read for 1 or 2 hours. But when you're super motivated and you go to read the Bible for the first time and it's being driven by emotion, you might read for 2 hours, which is great if you're in the mood and you got the time. But what happens on the day that you're not in the mood and you're not emotional? Well, if you're sticking to a consistent 10 minutes a day, even when you don't feel like it, you know you can dedicate 10 minutes to what you've committed yourself to. And so 10 minutes in the day is way greater than 2 hours during an emotional spike once a week, right? You know, and another example is, I will tell you that one honest conversation is greater than years of avoidance. Some of us have some conversations that we need to have with some people, and we've just been avoiding it for years and nothing's changing. But one simple, small conversation can completely change the whole dynamic of a relationship. You know, one random, put it this way, one disciplined decision a day is better than random burst of all-out effort periodically. Zechariah 4:10, you know, the Israelites, their temple had been destroyed, and they were wanting to build Jerusalem again, and the problem was that Jerusalem was in a pile of heaps. Literally it become a dump, like a refuge where people were taking their garbage and different stuff, and they were dumping it all out. And the Lord says, we're going to rebuild this temple. And obviously the prophets and the people feel pretty overwhelmed about that. And like, well, how in the world are we going to do this? We're not even talking about building. We got to tear down some stuff right now. And literally the word of the Lord comes, and he says to the prophet and to the people, he says something so significant and simple. He says, listen, do not despise the small beginnings. It doesn't matter how much of a small thing it is. Just make it something. And anything can start small and grow. And sometimes we just, when we're trying to make changes in our lives, we bite off things that are just too big. And it's really, the expectation is really unattainable, you know. Would I like to be able to rep 220 pounds on the bench press 20 times and do 3 sets? Absolutely. But I can't start at 200 pounds and think I'm going to get there. You have to start where you are and manage that so that you can build consistency and you can build strength. And over time, all of a sudden you'll find that you're doing the things that you want to do because you did small things. And God does not ignore small things in your life. Listen, The Bible talks about worshiping him in spirit and truth, and Jesus says there's some things that you're going to do in secret that nobody else knows about, but your Father in heaven knows, and he sees it, and it's a fragrant offering to him, and that's how he receives it. And so it doesn't have to be something grand. It just needs to be something that you know the Lord has put on your heart that is important, that you need to be doing daily. And if it's, no matter how small it is, just do it and be consistent and obedient. And those are the things that will actually begin to transform your life, because the truth is, my third point this morning is that whatever you consistently do defines you. For example, let me push this a little bit. You don't become something because you did it once, right? You become something because you do it repeatedly. Example, you're not all of a sudden a healthy person because you go and work out one day. You know, you know what I mean? You're not a patient person because today you happen to be in a good mood and the circumstances were such that you were able to be patient one time. You're not spiritually strong because you were really good for 1 week and just firing on all cylinders. You don't become a doctor because you take one medical class in college. And we know this. But you are whatever you consistently do. And so it's not as dangerous as it is to be defined by something that you do only one time. It's just as powerful to be defined, if you will, by the small things that you do regularly. For example, 1 Corinthians 15:58, he says, always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Hear the words that he's using right here. He's saying always. That's not when you feel like it, not at the beginning of the year, not when you're in the good mood, not when it's convenient. He's saying always. That word always is, again, daily. Give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord. Why? Because you know that your labor is not in vain. That's consistency. Consistency. Last week I said that you don't need a new life. You just need some new patterns in your life. And this week is how we figure out how do we make these new patterns actually stick. These new things that you're trying to implement in your life will build consistency when you commit to doing them daily. And the thing that most people miss sometimes is that you don't see a lot of change on the front end. And so consistency doesn't seem to feel very powerful at first, but that's because it takes time. See, consistency feels slow. It can feel boring. It feels like nothing is happening. But over time, when you're consistent with it and you look back over 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, all of a sudden you have this momentum building. And there's nothing more exciting than having momentum, because one of the things it does when you have momentum is, you know, if you miss one day in trying to be consistent, it's not that big of a deal. Why? Because you have this momentum that's been accruing, and you miss it and you realize, man, I didn't do it and I really needed to do that, and I missed doing it, so I'm going to do it again today. Not a big deal. But then all of a sudden, if you miss 5 days, now you're back into old patterns. And so consistency does a lot of things. It lets us know exactly where we really are in life, but it also gives us the ability to have a little bit of patience with ourselves. And you can flip all of this, right? So for example, if you do it one day, it's a small win. If you do it 5 days, now you're in a rhythm. If you do it 30 days, well, now it's a part of who you are. That's what consistency does. You know, your life changes when your patterns stop being something that you try and start becoming something that you just do automatically. I mean, that's where we want to be, right? And what's so cool about that is simple and is sustainable, because you know you're living out of who you are instead of trying to be something that you don't think you are. And this is where most people mess up, is that sometimes we just try to change everything at once, and that's intensity, and intensity doesn't last. Instead, you know, we need to pick one small thing that is small enough that we can actually attain it and repeat it daily. Because they're going to create some discipline, man, and that's going to change your life. It's going to have some pretty dramatic changes, right? I mean, honestly, a lot of us right now, you know, depending on where we are, obviously it's different for everyone, but I mean, most of the things that we're dealing with in life don't require a new revelation. They don't require some sort of new prophetic word from God and some sort of new aha moment. Those are good and those help in certain situations. But for purposes, most of us aren't needing the next revelation from God. We're just needing to change some patterns in our lives and find a habit that we can repeat daily. For example, if it's just 5 minutes of praying daily, if you just make it a habit of when you get in your car and you go to work, instead of putting on your favorite radio station or putting on your favorite band, say, from my house to this gas station, I'm just going to talk to God. And then I'm going to put my music on and get in my head and get right. Like, whatever it is, just create that habit. Or you say, you know what, every time I get to work, I'm going to make sure I'm to work early enough, and I have 3 minutes. I'm going to read a little bit of scripture before I go into work every day. Or just, say, this week I've been avoiding some conversations, and I'm going to make sure that I'm intentional about having some conversations with people that I've been meaning to reach out to or talk about. So much so that eventually you get to the point when someone pops in your mind, you just call them and talk to them instead of having to work up the courage to call somebody, right? So there's all these little examples that we can do of little things that will build consistency that you can sustain. Because sometimes we try to make so many changes at once that we're building a life that is unsustainable, and eventually you burn and you crash out. I mean, that's what religion is, right? Religion is man's attempt to try to become something that it doesn't think he is, and then we give him the routines that will get him to the place he wants to be. And people will try that, sometimes even for years, but eventually it will lead to burnout and crashing. So instead of doing all of this at once, like let's just build a simple pattern in your life that becomes a nice, smooth foundation that then you can grow from that and you can repeat it. And so this week I want to ask you guys, like I mentioned this last week, what's a pattern in your life that you need to take out and replace with something? What's something in your life that needs to be switched out? And this week I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to ask you to go harder this week. I'm not going to ask you to go even longer this week in something. I'm just going to have you to pick one pattern in your life from last week. Maybe you tried it for a couple days and then it fell through, or maybe you tried it once, or maybe you're like, oh my goodness, I forgot Pastor Zane actually gave us homework last week, and and I haven't had homework in years, so like you need to try it this week. Like, just pick one pattern, pick one thing that you can do that is simple enough that you can commit to it daily. Make it concrete, man. Like actually be a grown up. Like, have some conviction and commit to it and say, I'll try this week, but I will do it this week, and I'll do it every day. Find something that you can be committed to that the Lord is putting on your heart, that you're going to make this a part of who you are, not something you're going to try. And then you'll begin to see some differences, because your life is not going to be changed by things that you do occasionally. I'm sorry. It's just not. It's changed by consistency. Your life is changed by what you do consistently. Intensity can give you the energy to start something new, and that's huge, and that's important. But intensity will never, ever finish anything in your life. Consistency will finish it. Consistency will get you the things in life that you have been reaching for, that you've been believing for. And that's just what I have for you this morning. So I just want to encourage you guys to continue to challenge yourself, but don't be like so hard that you can't actually reach those goals, right? Be a friend to yourself and set some obtainable goals and some challenges. Find something that's important and commit to doing that daily. And if you mess up one day, not that big a deal. Stack 3 or 4 or 5 days good together, and then if you mess up for a day, whatever, hop back on the train. It's not that big of a deal. And then create it. All of a sudden, if when you do this for a month, you're going to wake up one day and just realize, man, I actually like doing this. I actually like having this in my life. I like being a part of this. This is having a huge impact. And then it becomes easy, and it's not a chore anymore, because it's becoming who you are. It's the same thing I tell people all the time. Like, it's, do you have to go to church to be a Christian? And like that's kind of the argument about people that don't want to go to church. And like the answer is like no. Like, obviously I'm probably one of the most lax people, as far as pastors go anyway on going to church. And but the reality is, though, that I will say this, that I can't tell you exactly which service was the most important service in my life growing up, but I can tell you that the accumulation of the church services that I went to growing up have shaped me into the person I am today. And that's what I'm talking about, right? Like, one church service isn't going to necessarily dramatically change your life. It may give you the inspiration to make some changes, but doing something one time isn't going to make a difference. But if you commit to being present weekly, all of a sudden you're stacking up more moments of being present versus all the moments of just not being there, what happens is all of a sudden you're going to begin to see your life changing. I mean, the reality is that some of you may even feel this to some degree, man. You know, you one day may wake up and say, wow, this friend of mine is like, their life is actually kind of changing, and there's like some good stuff happening. What's going on in your world? And then all of a sudden you realize that it's this, what's really happening in this world is they've made some consistent changes, and they're just being present, and they're growing, and they're moving forward. And sometimes you can feel like you're getting left behind. And the reality is that in this world, we custom fit and tailor fit everything to try to make it convenient to us. And I think convenience is the death of some things. Convenience is good for some stuff. Don't get me wrong. It can be really lucrative in business. But when it comes to development and wholeness as a human being, convenience can really kill some things in our life. And so we can't make the deciding factor on whether or not we're going to do something or be a part of something based upon how convenient it is. That's got to be like one of the last things that we consider, because we have to keep on the forefront of our minds and our lives, what am I committed to and what is important, whether it's convenient or not. And when we can commit to things on a daily basis, you'll see some of the most dramatic changes. I mean, it doesn't take long, honestly. Like, I'm not even talking about a couple years difference. I'm like, the reality is some of us would just start changing a couple little things daily. You'll see some differences within 30 to 40 days. And then within a year, all of a sudden, your life will look completely different. And so I just want to encourage you guys to literally let the Holy Spirit, I believe the Holy Spirit's been speaking to some of you already, putting his finger on some things, saying, hey, I want you doing this. I want you doing this. And most of us probably, some of our relationships with God, probably hear God say first, hey, stop doing this, whoa, you moron. Do this instead. So like wherever you are, like if you're kind of hard-headed and you need the Holy Spirit to slap you on the wrist for a second and say, hey, stop, now do this instead, that's fine. But I believe with all my heart that the Lord's already been putting on some of your hearts some things that he wants you to do, some things he wants you to be a part of, some small changes in your life. And like I just want to encourage you, do it. Just do it, man, and see what happens, dude. I guarantee you, within a short period of time, some of the things you've been believing for and hoping for and wanting in your life will begin to manifest. Because the Bible says that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that you can ask or think, according to the power that works in you. So you've got to unlock that power by becoming consistent and disciplined and watch your life change. Love you guys. Appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for joining us this morning. We will see you guys on Sunday. So make plans, say hi to one another, shake hands, and we'll catch you guys next week. Love y'all.